Hello everyone, welcome to another class for today. Today I'll be discussing on literature, the genre prose, short stories. In year 12, we have two themes that come under short stories, which is relationship and values. Today I'll be looking at the first or one of the short stories under the theme relationship, which is the Cabulliwallah by Rabindranath Tagore. Very important. During exams, you have to write down the title of the work studied, and you will lose marks if they are not quoted. They have to be in quotation marks. The spelling is to be correct, and the author's spelling as well. So Rabindranath Tagore should be remembered its spelling. Thank you. What is this story about? Now, the Cabulliwallah is a moving story about how two people with vast differences in their ages and background can become inseparable friends. Ramun, a peddler from Afghanistan, charms and is charmed by Minnie, a 5-year-old girl from Calcutta. Their friendship is tested when Ramun is sent to prison for injuring someone in a fight. Immediately after release, he visits Minnie, only to realize with a shock that she has grown up and he is now a stranger to her. Personally speaking, I really enjoyed reading this story. It talks again how it says they have vast differences, not only in age but in socio-economic background, the fact that they're of two different genders, and what's peculiar makes it more charming. So this story is very interesting. It talks about also how we can look beyond what society dictates for us to enjoy each other's company due to our race, due to our gender. We can venture out and find out that friendship can be made in the oddest of places. The background and setting of our story. Now, take note, students, background and setting are not necessarily the same things. Now, the setting, most of you know what is the setting. You've learned this from year 9, even in primary school. It is the physical place where the story takes place. So, for instance, if your story takes place in the classroom, that is the physical setting. However, the background, it talks about the social, political background or the political setting of the story. So, for example, if the story takes place during Easter, so an Easter party in your classroom. So the classroom is the setting, and Easter, during Easter, is the background. As we read the story, you will identify the background and the setting are quite different, but they work together. The Cabulliwallah is set in the streets of Calcutta, an overcrowded city in India. In the early 1900s, the people of the city are mostly Bengalis. They are superstitious, meaning they believe in supernatural activities, so they believe in that there is bad and evil things that lurk and there are consequences to them, and suspicious, or they are not sure of foreigners, but they are also cultured and aristocratic of means, and he appears to be well placed in the community. Street businesses thrive in India's cities, and peddlers going from house to house with their wares are a common sight. Now, where I stay at the moment in Lautoka, in Fiji, we have peddlers coming around our street. So peddlers are those who walk around your neighborhood offering their businesses to you. So in Lautoka, we have some men walking around shoe repairs. We have them in cars where they sell fish. We also have some peddlers who sell Indian sweets, bean, peanut, and all, etc. So these are some people. Just picture them walking around your street, going from house to house with their wares. Now, some of these peddlers, like Ramun, who is one of our main characters, the Cabulliwallah, he's also known as the Cabulliwallah, come from as far away as Afghanistan. Now, at the end of the year, the peddlers collect all their debts and then return back to their families for a short while. Life of these peddlers is harsh, right? It's very important to try and picture yourself in a different country, selling your wares or selling your products in a country that is not of your own, and there's also preconceived ideas of these people who come in, and they are not usually positive. Now they have to struggle to earn their living, and sometimes they have to resort to violence to solve their problems. So as Ramon does in the story. So later on, you will see that there is also conflict in the story that leads to consequences that changes the plot of the story. All right, the plot or the summary of the story. Now there's the narrator. She's a 5-year-old girl called Minnie. Now she befriends the street peddler Ramon, the Cabulliwallah. At first, she's terrified, so she's scared of Ramon, not only because of his looks, so maybe he had a menacing face, or to a little girl, he looks scary, but also because she has heard that these mounted men kidnap children and take them away to the strange land of Kabul. So just picture that as a little girl, she's got a wild imagination. So she is very imaginative. She's got things that preconceived ideas. So it could be fed from things that she's exposed to, either books that she read. Now this is in the 1900s. They don't have tablets. They don't have smartphones with them. So her imagination could come from the books that she read, or could also come from the stories that she hears from her parents. Unaware to their parents, she could be eavesdropping. However, the peddler's charm, along with his gentle bribery of nuts, raisins, and fruits, and Minnie's own friendly nature, quickly make them firm friends, sharing jokes and secrets. So that's a great twist. They eventually become friends because the peddler charms her by bribing her with the nuts that he brings and the raisins and fruits, and Minnie also is a very friendly girl. The seasons pass and the friendship continues to grow until it is time for Ramon to leave for his annual reunion with his family. So he goes back to his family every year, once a year, and returns back. Before leaving, he goes from house to house collecting his debts. At one of these houses, he has an argument with the debtor in which he injures him with a knife. So unfortunately, he goes to get his debt from someone who owed him money, and the debtor refused or causes an argument, and he stabs that person. He is arrested and imprisoned for many years on a charge of murderous assault. As the years pass, Minnie forgets about her old friend, and 8 years after his imprisonment, a much different looking Ramon arrives back in the lanes to renew his long lost friendship with Minnie. At first, the narrator tells Ramon, the narrator tells Ramon that he cannot see the girl as an important ceremony is underway, which is, I don't know, unfortunately or unfortunately, it is little Minnie's wedding day. Ramon then passes the usual gifts to the narrator to be given to Minnie. But before departing, he shows the narrator a piece of soiled paper with the impression of a child's hand on it. Now, this child is Ramon's daughter. Let me repeat that. So before departing, he shows the narrator a piece of soiled paper with the impression of a child's hand on it. This child is Ramon's daughter. To think that Ramon has a little girl, same age as Minnie, who, after all these years, he goes to visit and returns. That's why he forged that friendship with Minnie. So he's got the only memento of his little girl, which was just maybe her palm print, and it's on a very dirty piece of paper. So he's had it with him all these years while in prison, looking at that little girl's hand. So that is a very beautiful reminder of what he's going through and how he made friends with the narrator's daughter. Now the narrator is deeply moved, and against the protests from the ladies of the house, he summons Minnie. The Cabulliwallah is taken aback by the sight of Minnie, who is now grown up, appearing self-conscious in her wedding attire. The peddler realizes that there is no hope of reviving their old friendship. He also realizes with a jolt that his own little daughter must have grown up during these long years, and like Minnie, would have also changed. The narrator gives money to the Cabulliwallah and advises him to go back to his daughter. This, he hoped, would bring good fortune on his own child. So now we realize at the end of the story, we had the climax of the um, the knife assault, and the Ramun goes to prison for that assault, and then as he returns on Minnie's wedding day, not by he didn't do it incidentally, he did by accident. So he returns on that day, and then he realizes that his little girl too is already old and could be married off at that very moment. So he has no hope of reviving their friendship with Minnie, and also he has a lot to catch up with his own little daughter. So the Cabulliwallah returns back to his daughter, and then the narrator also hopes that the money that he gave the Cabulliwallah would also bring good fortune on his own child. So that is a very beautiful story that we have so many things to learn from. Okay, characterization, or the characters in our short story. Firstly, we'll start with our main character, Ramun, who is also known as the Cabulliwallah. Ramun is a native of Afghanistan. The Bengalis call him Cabulliwallah because Afghanistan's capital city is Kabul. So Cabulliwallah mean man from Kabul. It's directly translated to that. Ramun is described as being big, sturdy, great, tall, and formidable. His typical mountaineer's physique, added to the loose and soiled clothing and a tall turban he wears, paints a frightening picture of the man. The man he carries, which is said to be the bag, he carries, which is said to be used to carry children back to his land as slaves, sends fear into the hearts of not only children, but also adults like Minnie's mother. The Cabulliwallah cannot tolerate dishonest people or dishonest practices. So when the debtor denies having bought the shawl, Ramun is driven into justifiable violence. And I think that is very knowing of the man. He's very dishonest. He has every right to be, because he is trying to earn money to send back home. So when there is someone who is robbing him of his hard-earned money, he turns to violence. Later, his love for Minnie probably stems from the longing he has for his own daughter, of Minnie's age, thousands of miles away. Ramun's refusal to accept the money expressed in such manner. Now, one thing, whenever he would meet Minnie while she was younger and bring all these gifts to her to try and bribe her so they could be friends, the father always offered to pay for these gestures, but he never accepted them. So this revealed that he's a proud man who does not equate love with money. So he doesn't equal love with money. He gives away the precious goodies simply because he loves the child. To return to this gesture with money would be an insult to him. Likewise, he accepts the gift from the narrator at the end of the story because he believes it is given in good faith and similar honesty. Then there is Minnie. Minnie, the narrator's daughter, is intelligent and talkative to the point that her mother is often exasperated by her prattle. At first, meeting with the fruit seller, she is fearful of him, but as time passes, a great friendship develops between them, with the help of judicious bribery of nuts and almonds, of course. After Ramun's imprisonment, Minnie begins to change, not necessarily due to this loss, but because she is growing up. Her childhood innocence is replaced by maturity, and she begins to spend more time with other girls her age. She is married off at an early age. And this is very normal for children, young child brides. Once they are of marriageable age, they are given off to be married. So she could have been below 18, but this was normal during that time. Our next character. Now, the narrator, who is Minnie's father, is a writer by profession and also a compassionate man. He is also kind to the Cabulliwallah. He permits the peddler to befriend his daughter, and he turns a blind eye to his spoiling the child with nuts and fruits. Now, him putting up with the relationship also reveals the broad-minded nature to him. He is obviously a rich man, used to a good lifestyle and to high-class social association. Perhaps the narrator's best act of kindness is in sacrificing the expense of the wedding, because of the thought that in a distant land a long-lost father met again with his only child. Now, what this means, because the narrator's best act of kindness, he actually did not have a lot more festivities done because he thought of Ramun. And our last character of our short story is Minnie's mother. Now, Minnie's mother is a one-dimensional or stock character who does not seem to change. When we learn about features of short story, we talk about characterization. And there are different types of characterizations. So, Minnie's mother is a stoic or stock character. She appears the same from the beginning, and as we further on in the story, we do not really see her change according to the different levels of the story. Furthermore, she appears to be a typical mother who gets upset by inquisitive children and who always fears something will go wrong. So you can say she's a pessimist. She sees everything as half empty. And the opposite of pessimist is an optimist who sees everything as half full. So those are our characterization of our short story. Now we'll move on to themes. Themes can be something called the lessons learned that you learn from the short story. They can be some of the moral values that have been brought up by the short story. They are masked in the questions like in the external questions like that. They'll ask you what lessons have you learned from the short story. So those questions are your themes. So our first theme is separation. Now, separation is a recurring theme in the story. The Cabulliwallah is separated from his family for most of the year while he is in Calcutta selling his goods. Then he is separated from them and also from Minnie for 8 years while he is in prison. No doubt this separation is painful, but it becomes even more painful when he returns to Minnie's house to find that they no longer have anything in common. Their separation, which he had thought was temporary, is now permanent. The pain intensifies when it occurs to him that this long separation may have caused a similar change in relationship with his own daughter back in Afghanistan. The narrator regards Minnie's withdrawal from him and her desires to mix with girls as a form of separation, and this saddens him. Another separation that will deeply affect him is Minnie's imminent departure for her in-laws' home. This will sadden Minnie as well, although it is something that every girl and every father have to go through. So a recurring theme, as it's already been mentioned, is separation. So separation between Ramoon and his family, and then Minnie and Ramoon, and then in the last stage of the story we hear of Minnie also being separated from her father to go and live with her in-laws. Our next theme is sadness. All human beings experience sadness regardless of their socio-economic position. Sadness is something that no amount of wealth can overcome. The narrator is sad that his light-hearted Minnie forgets her old friends so quickly. He also regrets losing the company of his talkative daughter, who now hardly speaks to him. She's now a teenager in the late part of the story, so obviously there is sadness because the narrator cannot speak to her, as he used to before. And the sadness that is always at the back of his mind is that one day Minnie will leave his home for good. He is also sad for Ramoon, who has not been able to share his love with Parbati for years. Parbati is Ramoon's wife. The Kabuli fruit seller is sad when he discovers he has lost Minnie's friendship because she has now become an adult. Likewise, he is sad when he thinks about his own daughter. Surely he would not find her as he used to know her. Besides, what might have happened to her in these 8 years? And a lot can happen within those 8 years, so there is sadness in the story. And once again, I really enjoyed reading this story due to the multidimensional facet of the story. There's sadness, there's also regret, and then you learn of a different era where people had to make a lot of sacrifices, especially fathers. Moving on, our next theme is loneliness. All people experience loneliness. Minnie is lonely perhaps because she has no brothers and sisters her own age to play with. Therefore, she seeks the attention of her father and later of the Cabulliwallah. The Cabulliwallah is lonely because his family is so far away. Therefore, he develops sentimental ties with Minnie. The narrator is lonely when his daughter leaves his company in favor of people of her own age. So in the story, we find that two lonely people, irrespective of their age, can become friends or forge friendship because they try and bridge the gap that loneliness has created. Another theme is friendship Out of loneliness, great friendships may arise. The narrator develops attachment with the characters in his fictions, and the Cabulliwallah develops a friendship that is genuine because he happily parts with his precious resources in order to make the child happy. Moreover, when he is released from prison, he visits her the very next morning with raisins and grapes, which he somehow obtained from a countryman. The overall theme for both this short story and our second short story that you'll be learning for year 12 is relationships. And one relationship that comes from this story is friendship. So we know that the friendship was formed through loneliness, and also we find out that friendship can be between the most unlikely of friends, which is Ramun, a very man who's seasoned, who's old, and a beautiful little girl who is portrayed as inquisitive and a very happy child. Our next theme is survival. Now, this story teaches us about survival. People sometimes have to make tremendous sacrifices so that their families can survive. The Kabuli fruit seller travels more than 1,000 miles to a foreign land in order to provide for his family. So that speaks on so many levels of what type of man Ramun was. So he could survive in a new country that is not of his own, just so he could provide for his family back at home. With survival, I believe, comes violence. You have to be in very tight situations where you have to resort to violence in order to survive. So sometimes people have to resort to violence in order to survive. The Cabulliwallah fights with a neighbor for what is his. When he is denied justice, he strikes out. This is to be expected from people who have been exposed to a harsh environment. In Ramun's case, the barren and unyielding terrains of Afghanistan, and then the streets of Calcutta. You will only portray what you are exposed to. So he's exposed to a harsh environment, so his justifiable violence towards his survival was imminent, and it showed in the story. Last theme we have is compassion. Now, compassion comes when you identify yourself with another person's suffering. The narrator experiences compassion when he recognizes that Cabulliwallah too is, but compassion is just an empty sentiment unless it leads you to help the person for whom you feel compassion. The narrator gives the Cabulliwallah what appears to be quite a large sum of money because he knows and trusts that he will use it to see his own daughter again. So without reciprocation of the compassion that you have, they are merely empty words. So the narrator was a man full of compassion by giving that large sum of money to Ramun. Last feature of our short story is styles. First style is traditional story, so it is a traditionally made story. The Cabulliwallah is a well-made story. It has a clear beginning, which exposes two of the major characters, the narrator and his daughter Minnie, with enough description that we may form a positive feeling about Minnie. There is also a middle, which allows the relationship between the characters to develop, and a number of complications and crises leading to a climax and a clear ending. These are the hallmarks of good traditional stories. So there's a beginning, middle, that we have the climax, and then leading down to the resolution. And we finally find out the main reason why Ramun befriends Minnie, because of that soiled paper that he showed the narrator of the only sentiment that he had of his little girl. The story has three major characters, the narrator, his daughter, and Ramun, with the narrator making comments on the others from time to time. All these characters have different socio-economic backgrounds, education, sex or gender, age, and attitude to life, thus making the reading an enriching experience. The